Consciousness is shifting right now in a big way. I'm both excited about it and some parts of it seem scary. When you're in your spirit mind space, you can really create all this stuff and manipulate energy in a way that's free from the bounds of physical. That idea that there's scarcity is true in the material world. Energy is not like that at all. And actually money is not like that either. The more you take, the more there is, just like energy. When you start to work with an energy tool like this, it's coming from love, it's coming from permission, it's coming from flow rather than trying to stop something. You can't stop being connected. You can't stop the flow of the universe. You don't even want to. AI is almost this like perfect material mind. The material mind is just overheating right now. That's why you see a rise in violence and suicide. But AI is likely to solve that. Technology and consciousness are always together. AI is probably going to play a big part of this like splitting into two planets. And it's the same thing that you hear about the fifth dimension, but I don't think we'll understand any of it until after it's happened. There's this new energy hitting the planet that's causing, I'm sure many people have experienced this. Like if you have a great idea or you have like, you're connected to some kind of information flow or truth or inspiration, like if you're not getting it out to the world, you feel like kind of this energetic, I call it like constipation. That's probably not the best analogy, but but you feel this kind of like, oh, I want to get this out. I want to help people. There's more, like the desire to help people is so big. And so when it's not manifesting all the way, sometimes we feel that sense of like, struggle.
At the risk of us being us and us going to the places that we go to, you mentioned constipation.
Energy constipation.
but I think there's a really interesting point there, because I think so much in the personal development space. I remember there was a particular point for myself when the Inspired Evolution podcast was birthed. I had to actually turn the faucet off of the amount of input that was coming in, because I think we take on so much, and we learn, we grow, we transform, we learn, we grow, we transform. But there's a certain point where you're carrying around so much insight, and yet you haven't actuated and actioned that into your life, that actually it becomes a little bit, I'm not saying you were stifled, but it does become a little bit stifling in some ways.
It does.
Or you're carrying quite a bit there. And then your next step of input, I almost see it, and maybe it's great because I'm speaking to you, it's like energy, is I almost feel like your bandwidth gets occupied, and you've kind of got to free up some of the bandwidths of energy to be like by letting some of it out and creating something and outputting. And I think that's a really important point, especially for those people tuning into this particular podcast, because so many amazing people tune into this podcast that have so many incredible offerings in the world, and yet they're taking in more, but they're not putting out as much.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a challenge. It's a really difficult position to be in. It's funny. I remember, for me, it was quite a while ago when that was happening. When I was teaching energy work, I started teaching maybe 2003, and at that point, I didn't really want to teach, but I kind of, enough people were asking that I kind of just had a little group in my house. We get like 6 people, do a little teaching, and then it kind of blossomed from there. I moved to Sedona, started teaching every week, and it just kind of kept moving as I accepted that. That's a role that I was going to play. It's not what I wanted, but I accept. Okay, I guess this is what's happening this life.
Spirit had a mind of its own. It's called spirit mind. It's not. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
But there was a time, and I think most people get this, get inspiration. There was a time where I'd done so much training myself, so much study, just of my own personal growth, and so many years and hours of meditation and so on, and so I had really refined what I had to offer. So the people that were showing up were really excited and were getting a lot of value, and I could see I was helping people. But there weren't that many people showing up because I didn't, my expertise has nothing to do with marketing. If anything, people that are very inspired sometimes are sort of allergic to marketing. It's like kind of afraid to, like both excited to tell people about their, to have people to teach, but afraid to like promote themselves. And I had that. So I had all these wonderful classes, and then, even in Tokyo, but we'd have, 20 people or, it was enough. It was enough to make a living, and I was doing what I wanted. But it wasn't until I met Mindvalley, connected with them, that they sort of solved that problem for me. They said, hey, let's make an online class. Let's start getting out to more people. And they said, basically the agreement was, hey, you own your content. We're not going to tell you how to teach, but just let us handle the marketing. Don't try to tell us how to market. That's what we do. And it was just, the synergy there just over the next few years, just kind of grew and grew and grew until suddenly there were millions of people that I was able to touch and help. And that sense of kind of inspiration, constipation, was gone. It was like relieved, like, ah, I'm helping people. Like it's working. It's reaching people I want to reach.
I'm conscious that not everybody that is tuning in will be able to access becoming an author on Mindvalley. So, what
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
some of your tips to for us to get out of our own way to start to create? Because I also heard from that it just started with a really humble offering and a very small group that sort of then continued to expand and evolve. And I want to just shine a light on that for a moment because this podcast is, at the time of this recording, Touchwood closing in on 100,000 subscribers, and I'm still like, whoa, that's happening. I'm still very in awe of what's going on, Touchwood. But it started with me opening up my doors every fortnight to people to come over to my house and us just having conversations like you and I are having with my local community. And that's kind of where the podcast grew. And I did that for about a year before the podcast started. So I think in our
Yeah.
minds, I think also the nature of online marketing and content, there's this things need to be polished and perfected to a certain level before we execute. But it starts with something really small and humble,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I would actually recommend, and maybe it's just because I did it this way, but I would recommend doing things in person rather than online to get started. Because online, while there's this beautiful ability to reach many people, it's one way. Like I'm not feeling very connected with all those students. Like if I meet somebody, this happens when I travel now. It still surprises me, but I'll be. I was in Hawaii with my parents. We took a little vacation, and somebody in line behind me, like, "Are you Jeffrey Allen?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm Jeffrey Allen, complaining about the breakfast prices at the hotel." Like you're getting the real me. and, and then, uh, and then they said, "Oh, I took your program; it was really wonderful." And I could tell that this person had spent many hours with me. They really knew me. They're with me every day, listening to my meditations, but I'm just meeting them for the first time. And so, uh, well, it's great to reach so many people when you're developing your own teaching and your own sharing. Doing it with live people is so much deeper. Like that's how I learned to be a teacher. Is I had a group of people in the room I could listen to them energetically, and I could listen to them with my ears, and I could notice like, oh, this is a time where I'm just talking and people are kind of tuning out. Okay, so let's take a break. What does everybody need? I learned, and I would do weekend long workshops where it was just me, and I've got 2.5 days, and I've got those are getting pretty big. I have like 60 or 80 people in the room, and I'm like, what do you do with people for that long? That's still fun and entertaining, and they're growing and they're engaging. It's not about me talking; it's about them having an experience. And I think that I started teaching before there really was an online space to teach, right? So the internet wasn't doing very much in 2003. It weren't big channels like this. We could reach out and podcast and reach people. So that's what I'd recommend: is people start small, and because teaching is mostly about learning. Like teaching is how you deepen your own growth. You can try to explain like, here's an insight I had, and you share it with 5 people or 10 people, and then they ask you questions, and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. Okay, you're right. That didn't quite make sense what I said. Right? So you get this real time feedback from your students, and you develop this really beautiful bond and relationship over the years. Without that, when I met my Bill, I never would have had something interesting enough to share. Right? It's somebody asked me that at one point. They actually said, "Oh, can you tell me your formula? Like, what are the things you did? Because I want to follow them." And this was this really wonderful woman. She's probably mid-20s, but like super tuned in, intelligent. But she asked me, and I said, "I don't think my advice is going to help you." And she said, "Why?" And I'm like, well, I spent 15 years as a software engineer learning how to, break things down, organize them. And, I was a user interface specialist. So it was how do people use the information? That was my specialty. And then I spent 10 years studying higher consciousness and intuition and healing. And then I spent 15 years practicing. And then, I said, so I think what you're looking for is what can you do this month? Right? You can't gain decades of experience in a formula. You have to actually go just live your lives and do it. So that's what I would advise people. Like, don't quit your day job. Do this as an extra thing. Like I had a software job on the side that was, it was not on the side, it was my main thing. It was paying the bills. I was even practicing energy work there and teaching a little bit there. And I just like let it grow up at a natural pace. Don't try to, don't believe that you have to make it blow up overnight online. Otherwise you're a failure. I think that's a silly thought. Yeah.
Hey there, Inspired Soul. This conversation with Jeffrey is about to get even deeper. This is a really great conversation. Just before we get there, just a humble request for those of you that haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, please do take a moment and hit that subscribe button just below. As I'm saying the word subscribe, it's lighting up. Take a moment to hit that button and hit that bell notification icon. Everything you see around here is powered and empowered by your subscription to this channel. Thank you so much. And to all of you that are subscribed to the channel, my God, thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Everything around here is powered by you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you. With that, back to the episode. A question that's popped into the field is it's around technology, it's around energy, and it's around good housekeeping practices. Because I think so much of what you described before is like someone meets you, and I've found this with the Inspired Evolution Touchwood. They used to say we're the average of the 5 people we spend our time with, and that's still true. But you're also actually the average of the 5 people you spend your time with in a parasocial relationship, is what they're finding. And the parasocial relationship is someone's got a relationship with myself or yourself online in the digital space. We're one of their 5. And the interesting thing that happens is when they meet you, which I've noticed is happening, is like I'll interact with somebody that's met me on the online space. They've consumed like 20 podcasts and they've come and talked to me, and they've hit the ground running at the point where they left off the conversation with me online. And I have to my brain has to kind of go, oh, okay, here we are in the conversation. I have to sort of land in the conversation with them at that point where they're picking up from. Which has always been a very interesting thing to drop into. But noticing also, if we zoom out for a quick second, Jeffrey, that, I'm hoping that the Inspired Evolution and what, and I can totally attest for your work, that there's more signal than noise in the work that we're producing. But if we zoom out, there's a lot of noise. There is a lot of noise that these technologies, and we will get back to, the rabbit and how it, translated for you and Ayumi. I'm sure that's in the conversation down the track. But also, technology, energy, housekeeping, because a lot of energy also it requires a bit of work, right? Like it's being mindful, being aware, doing the tools, doing the practices, clearing, making sure things are feeling a certain way, and also just generally being aware. But when there's so much input, so much noise in a world that is so attached to devices, so much technology going on, those inputs actually have an impact on our state. They literally do, and that impacts our energy, correct? So from there, I'm just opening up a thread of conversations for you to unpack and explore with us.
Yeah. It's it maybe a simple way to think about it from an energy perspective is, like I always use the example like this, this is your body, it's like a glass. This glass is your body. And then, what's inside is kind of going to determine your experience, like how much you're enjoying yourself and feeling like yourself. And, ideally, probably if we can strip away all of the noise of our modern society, we would like say you went on vacation for 10 days, right? By the end of the 10 days, this glass would just be full of you. Like I will have spent this time just filling up, with my own energy and my own inspiration, and there's not a lot of stuff coming in. So I'm filling the glass up with me. And then everything that's not me is going to just float off the top. And I'm going to feel, that's why at the end of vacation, you feel so great and you feel really good. And then you go home, and after a while, it's kind of, you kind of get back into the groove that you weren't so excited about, that maybe you appreciate, but you know that I'm not 100% me right now. I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I've got other responsibilities more, or distractions, depending how you want to phrase it. But even in daily life, if you take a little bit of time to just in the morning to say, okay, I'm going to fill this up with me. It doesn't matter what it is. That's why people like to do yoga in the morning, or people like to meditate in the morning, or some people it's just drinking a cup of coffee in the morning. Something where even some people it's going out for a smoke, right? I'm not a smoker. I don't think it's good for me, but but for some people, I could tell energetically that that was their way during the day. They could get out, get it. They'd go outside and take a few moments alone. They didn't feel any responsibility for dealing with anybody else. It was like, oh, that's like a self energy management break. So that it really can happen any way. And without it's, I think, especially these days, it's, you just become a function of, you know, I'm a person that responds to my inbox only. And there's everything coming into your inbox through
Yeah.
social media and your phone and everything, and you're feeling like you need to respond. Um, and it's uh, that's okay sometimes, but I think for the most part, we want to respond to our higher guidance, our own inspiration, and then we want to like share our love with the world, share our inspiration with the world, rather. And that's not something that people need to ask questions for or send us an email to request. Like, this something happens naturally when we're not feeling sort of distracted or polluted by everything else, everything that's not us. Yep.
Yeah, the word distortion is coming to mind at this particular juncture as well. And I think it just reinforces for me the importance of like a simple morning practice, like you said, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, where you just allow the glass to sort of fill back up. You just take a moment to be you, even if it's incremental and it's day by day. I
Yeah.
think there's such an opportunity there. And I know it sounds super cheesy to be like morning practice, but it is so important, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be 100%, 0%. That's one of the tricks to energy work is our material mind, our analytical mind always wants to deal in black and white, good and bad. And so it gets this idea like, oh, that's a good idea. I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to meditate every day for 30 minutes forever without ever missing. And if I ever miss a day or only go 15 minutes, then I'm a total loser and I failed.
Failure.
You're like,
Gosh,
okay,
idiot.
so
No, sorry.
let's like maybe let's just shoot for the middle. Just say like sometime I'm just going to remember, especially when I need it, I'm going to remember to like take a break, take a real breather, and tune in to meditate. If it's not every day, that's totally okay. Like have your goals, but don't take it too seriously. That's just another heavy weight that we put on ourselves. And I think in the personal growth circles, especially, we can overdo it. And just
Yeah.
let it be fun, let it evolve. Like there's days where we don't have a dishwasher. Well, we do. It's these two hands, right? This is the dishwasher. And so there's sometimes after dinner, I'm like, I don't want to wash them, and so I don't. And the next morning, I wake up and like probably I do them then, but occasionally it'll go like another day. Just like next evening, I'm like, whew, okay, dishwasher's broken. Okay, I got to repair it. Okay, here we go. And I always feel better afterwards. But giving myself permission to not be perfect makes life so much easier, right? Like it's okay. Like if there's dishes in the sink one day, it's not my norm, but I don't have to be perfect. Just having that freedom, it's like, it's actually my wife Hisami that kind of helped me find that freedom. I'm 100% kind of person. Once I go for something, I'm just gonna do 100% forever, right?
Engineers can be binary. Yeah, ones and zeros. Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of softening that's available, and I do wonder if, because I think people tune into yourself and go, oh, like kindness, gentleness, like we can, but I think it's worth us having a conversation around like the cultivated self,
Yeah,
because I'm sure even the nuance that we've just been describing about input versus output and technological input versus output, like sometimes even just we're actually cultivating a self in each of those little moments as well. And like you said, that there's a self that's like, you need to do the dishes this way, and oh, you're completely wrong, or it's like, actually, yes, the dishes are important, but also how you treat yourself about
yeah,
doing the dishes is equally as
yeah,
important. What sort of self are you cultivating?
yeah, yeah. That's perfect, and that's what I find that what shifted for me over the years. I can't really say when is I stopped feeling guilty if I didn't do what I thought I should do. I like take the dishes for example. I stopped feeling guilty at some point, and then things shifted kind of probably around the same time. Things shifted into a space of love where the reason I would even if I was tired some nights, I would just remember wouldn't it be nice tomorrow to wake up and like, and everything's clean already? It's like, oh, I want to give my future self that experience. And so it didn't feel like it went from something like, oh man, I got to do this again. It went to like, here's a chance to love myself, to give my future self a little gift. And I'm like, I totally want to do that. Or my wife, a lot of times it's like, oh, I want Hisami to like come in here and everything's clean. And I know she's not going to be on my case either way. She's happy, but it's just a little gift of love. And so when I like that shift changes everything. Suddenly, like the same task, but it's an opportunity to express love rather than something I have to do or I'm a bad person. Right? Just that reframing changes your whole life. Just that little reframing.
I kind of want to hang up the podcast right there. There's a whole, oh, I won't, please, pardon me. But that's such a masterstroke, like to forecast, hey, like my future self, and to stop beating yourself up in the moment, and then, soften that. But then also allowing the next thing to drop in, which is like, hey, present state awareness, but then also some level of future state awareness, saying what would be nice for my future state self, in that present moment without overstressing your present self, but just kind of gifting. And I love the energy of gifting. That sounds.
And it works. It's funny. As you're saying that, I just remembered at some point that like an even deeper experience happened where I was thinking that one day. I was like, oh, I could give my future self this gift. And then I realized, actually, right now, my future self is giving me the gift of not having to do the dishes. Oh, like tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to really love today's self. I'm going to wake up and say, oh, last night I was really tired. And I'm just so grateful that I gave myself room to just relax, not have to do anything, even spend 2 minutes doing the dishes. It's like, it can go any direction. You give to your future self, let your future self give to you. I've found that when we feel stress, or when I feel stress, that's if I can reach for that love space, there's always somewhere to apply it. Like if I'm stressed about some future event, like I'm, going to see a sick friend, or going into an interview that I'm worried about, or something. I mean, I don't really worry much, but but if there is something, as soon as I notice that worry, I just send love to my future self. That's why it's coming to our attention right now, is so we can send love to that future self. Same thing about the past. If I remember, like, yesterday, I could have paused a moment and then phrased that little email a little more kindly, but I sort of just like, sent something out that maybe I hurt somebody's feelings. And so the reason it comes up is that I can send a little love to that past self. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay that I'm not perfect, and send a little love to the other person. Usually they didn't even notice or get hurt. It's usually just about me imagining that they might have and feeling guilty, not being a perfect person. And so there's always an opportunity when anything stressful, past, present, or future, you can always, from now, send love to that self, that other self.
I have a very trippy-dippy question around some of that, because I feel like that's where signs and synchronicities might just be showing up for us, is us sending ourselves prayers and blessings into the future and into the past, and then going back and going, oh, I was just thinking that, and it's 11:11, and I've coded my mind to believe that 11:11 means something to me. So, and then it's like, I must be onto something. And it's like, maybe my future self is sending some love back to my past self to find its purpose or its path and its direction. And this is one of the clues. Your interpretations of signs and synchronicities and around the energy work and sending it back and forth.
Yeah. I try to, like, it's fun because it's kind of a way to apply that information that we don't understand. Like, you don't need to understand how time space works. You don't need to understand that, it's all happening at once. It's not actually linear. That's just the experience. The body is linear, on a linear path through it, but it's all happening now. It's just now is not as small as you think it is. Now is actually infinitely large. That's how intuition works. But you don't have to understand any of that to be able to functionally tap into it, just by saying, "Oh, I'm just going to love my future self or my past self." Or if I'm thinking about my partner and we had a fight, I'm just going to send love to both of us. Yeah, so it's really easy. Yeah.
There's a really interesting component to that as well. So you're sending love to your past and future self. I remember doing this exercise where it was loving kindness meditation, and then you take your meditation off your mat, and then you'd walk it out into the world, and you'd walk past people, and you'd sort of, I hope you have a nice day. I hope you have a nice day. And you'd say that to people, may you be loved, may you be blessed, may you be loved. But you don't say it to them verbally. You say it inside yourself, and you send them little like, they're not love darts, but darts of kindness and love, right? And they're none the wiser, right? But the interesting thing is, you would think that, and this goes back to the input output conversation we're having today, that you would think that sending out a bit of positive energy would deplete you of positive energy, is the mainstream sort of, the batteries that we kind of see in the world. However, the inverse kind of happens. You send out something positive, and then it's like, you feel brighter. Like, can you explain or speak to any of that? Like, what?
Sure. Yeah. That's a good point. I forget that because I know it's not true, but I used to believe it was true. So I can relate. That idea that there's scarcity is true in the material world. So when you're talking about objects, it's definitely true. If there's there's like 2 pens here, and like you take one, well, now I've only got one, right? But so that is true for objects. And then because we have bodies, and that's what we see and feel, we kind of imagine everything's like objects, like object accounting. But it has nothing to do with energy. Energy is not like that at all. And actually, money is not like that either, which is kind of a blow you away once for that. Money is no longer an object because it's not. You can't even exchange it for an object anymore. You can't like trade it in for gold or silver, right? It's just energy now. And we have a perfect example of this, like when music, you used to buy like there's 2 CDs on the shelf. You buy a CD, now there's one left, right? Somebody buys the second one, there's no more CDs. We ran out, right? That doesn't happen anymore. Now you just go onto your favorite music store, and when you buy one, there were 2 before. Now you buy one, now there's 3. There's one more. If 10 more people buy them, now there's 10 more. Every time somebody takes one, there's one more. What happened here? Before, if you take one, there's one less. But now if you take one, there's one more, and it didn't cost anything. You're like, that's pretty strange. That's because you moved out of objects and into energy accounting. So, and the online space is in the energy world. It's not in the physical world. And that's why it's just exploding. That's why things are so different. But our brains are still thinking, kind of wired to this old, physical world object accounting. But really, none of us live in that space, except for things we like eat and stuff. But even money is not like that. There's money. The more you take, the more there is. Just like energy. There's no this idea that there's a pie that if you take a slice, then somebody else starves. That's just not true anymore. It hasn't been true for decades.
Hey there, guys. This is an incredible conversation with Jeffrey. We've gone into so many different places so far, and yet more to come. I want to know from you in the comments below, so far in the conversation, what has been your biggest takeaway? And that's me. I read all the comments. I try to get back to as many as I can. Please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hello. Back to the episode. Can you unpack that money piece further? Because my mind is just blowing around. The CDs, and then it's so true. Like the more... Like I took a CD and now there's like 2 CDs, and then the day someone else will buy a CD and there's 4 CDs. Like, what is going on? Like, yeah, absolutely. So this energy accounting versus material accounting,
object accounting, yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah, and money. I think we tend to think money is objects because we still have some leftover. You can get a couple of bills and some coins. And those things are objects, and it's really clear that when they run out, you don't have any more of them. So sure, it feels like, that's sort of the leftover objects. Money was objects at one point, hasn't been for a long time. And oddly enough, I was part of one of the original projects that helped make that happen. I worked for the Department of Energy back in the early 1990s. And there was this group called the Electronic.
Not. By the way, just for those people tuning in, sorry, just to butt.
A different kind of energy.
Yeah, yeah. You still work for the Department of Energy, but it's a very different Department of Energy. That was a different. So we need to clarify that. Sorry.
A different Department of Energy. I was working at a research laboratory for the U.S. government, and it was a computer scientist and math programmer was my title. And the group I worked with was the Electronic Commerce Program. And it wasn't like my doing. I was just kind of a little junior person at that time. But that group was responsible for the first electronic money transfers that happened in the United States. And for setting up that, like basically changing from object accounting into energy accounting. And that changed at the time. Probably some people understood what was going to happen, but now we're getting further and further away from objects for money. Anyway, but to make it practical, so how do you think about that in your life? Think about it like I like to think about it as circulation. So if you think about the way energy circulates, when you circulate something outward, something will naturally sort of come back in. Like things are the energy world, everything's always full. There's no sense of lack. But the question is, what is it full of? Like, is my energy full of my own heart and love and experience and joy and passion and teaching and learning? Or is my energy full of YouTube and Netflix and email and there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff, right? But you want to mostly be full of you and participate in all the other things that are fun too, but mostly that's circulating your own energy. And what I found is that the more we do this, like if I circulate energy out into the world, if I help people, then money comes back as a response. So money it's like a currency of exchange, just, even in that way. But if I focus on how to make money, I'm sort of in the object accounting world. And then I've got to compete with other people and I've got to somehow, I've got to get more, right? Because there's not enough for everybody. So I have to get more. And, but if I'm focused on helping people, providing a service or a product or however it is, everybody helps people, right? So, if you're cutting somebody's hair, that's really helping them. You're probably their therapist too, right? Not just their hairstylist, right? And that's one of the few professions where you can touch people legally, so that those people get really close, right? And so there's, if you're helping people, naturally money will flow back to you. It may not flow back in that same moment. It's always an instantaneous exchange. But if you're just focused on helping, that will be coming back to you energetically at some point. The trick is just set up the system in a way so that there is a place for money to come in. There's a way for money to come to you. If there isn't a way for it to get to you, then it's going to come some other way. Yeah.
That was actually one of the big pieces I've had to learn about money online is systems. Systems are really important because money as an energy likes organization. Can I say that out loud?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very interesting piece that learning that, okay, if we've got organized structure, money can actually flow in through a conduit and money actually prefers to flow in that direction. I'm sure it's like that for not just money energy, but even our own energies, building our own structure and infrastructure within ourselves with our energy bodies.
Yeah. Yeah, if the only way the money can get to you is through your paycheck at your job, then that's the only way money's going to come to you.
Yeah.
So, just make some other way that money can come in other than the lottery. That's kind of that's an unlikely way for it to come in. So somewhere where you're adding value and then that money's coming back, like something that directly exchanges money, helping people for some kind of money is great. Yeah.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
he's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. Brilliant. Thank you so much for clarifying that. I'm visualizing as you're describing this, because we're putting out and we're also getting back in, I can't help but sort of reach for the model of the toroidal field. And one of the questions that's always been present for me, and I'd love to ask it of you here today, is you've got a toroidal field, and for those that don't know, I'll get our editor to flick it on screen now, to put an image of the toroidal field. And it's like a donut, but with the energies kind of going through the central part of the donut and then going around the donut bit of the donut. I'm not describing it very well. I'm so glad there's an image on screen right now. Doing that thing with the toroidal field. I've always wondered, like, the origin point, or is there an alchemical point? Is there an origin point in that energy field? Because you were just describing, there's a lot, Netflix and things, like all these distortions in the field. But surely there's a place, and maybe this is just the engineer in me that looks for like the origin, but there's surely a place where things start and things clear up and things, how does that work with our field?
That's interesting. Yeah. So you're kind of, the reason it gets tricky to describe is that you're trying to describe it as something that's infinite. And then you're asking, like, how do we draw that in finite space, or how do we understand that in finite space? So at best we can sort of approximate, right? And that's what the first deep physics teacher that I studied with told me. Everything I'm going to teach you is not right, but it's the best approximation we have right now. So it's still really useful. But I just want you to get in your head. He told the whole class, I want to get you in your head right away that nothing I'm telling you is actually right. And we're like, what? This is in high school, right?
That's big coming from a physics teacher who,
yeah. But it was like, oh, that was just that little preface to his whole class kind of set the stage for everything. So and because things don't have to be right to be useful, right? And so if you're describing this toroid field, that energy it's infinite, and the center is actually everywhere. And so that's the confusion, right? So that's why if you go deep enough into the center, you get to everywhere. That's why quantum physics looks insane to our like object-based brain. It's like, well, what do you mean when you go in, it gets bigger? What do you mean that there's like this does like the amount of energy that would be required to keep an atom together is the same amount of energy that's in the entire universe. So how does that make sense? Like, if you're like, oh, because they're the same, because the point is everywhere, right? But we can't make sense of it because we're in these forms, right? It just kind of blows your brain away. But functionally, you can use that. So one thing, kind of continue a theme we were talking about earlier, when I started teaching more and more people and teaching online, what's Mind Valley was really helping my programs get to so many more people. at some point I was noticing, there's a lot of energy coming back to me because people are watching and they're interacting with me, even though I'm not consciously interacting with them. I'm still interacting energetically somehow. And I noticed I'm like, whoa, I'm starting to feel like a little spacey and like overwhelmed. And when I tuned in, I could see I'm like, oh, I'm energetically talking to so many people all the time. And like, how do I manage this? It's too much for my body. And then it occurred to me, it's okay because they're not interacting with my body anyway. So I don't have to run all that energy through my body. So what I did was I'm really into sacred geometry. So I made a star tetrahedron, which is kind of the geometric structure of the torian field, right? So if you could push pause on the universe, you'd see all these little geometries, right? Of course, you can't do that, but if you could, you'd see all that. You can look into Nassim Haramein if you want to know more about that. He goes deeper than anybody can
we've
understand.
had him on the podcast, and
he's a super genius,
Yeah.
But I made this little star tetrahedron, and then I spun. It actually spins both ways. So I spun one to the left, spun one to the right, and then one is centered relative to me. And then I said, I'm just going to make basically a mini me energetically, and then I just put it outside of my physical space, so that everybody could still connect and could still tap into that same energy and that same teaching, but it didn't cycle through my body anymore. And like immediately I felt relief. I was like, oh. And that's when the program was able to reach more people because suddenly it wasn't limited to my capacity in a physical body to cycle all that energy. And so I just wake up every morning, I just check in. I'm like, oh, how's energy, Jeffrey, doing? I'm just spin it up a little bit. And, oh, looks good, And just like 2-3 seconds of attention and everything's bright and clean. And then I'm both maintaining the energy communication with everybody, but I'm not I'm free. I'm free in my space to go about my day. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear you also talking about power objects and sacred geometry and crystals. Is intention a big part of what you're wielding to program said objects?
For me, it's probably a little more kind of natural or off the cuff now. So I've spent so much time working just in the pure energy realm that I don't really feel the need to have a physical object representing things. But sometimes, like this crystal, this is one that my wife picked out. It was a gift from her, and so I like it. When I wear it, I can feel that I just feel a little bit of resonance there. It's helping me kind of remember who I am. It's just a little reminder, but it's not actually doing the work. So like that, you could be like just completely naked in the middle of the desert and still have intention and create things energetically, and hopefully you'd have some sunscreen or an umbrella, but you wouldn't last long, but you get the idea. There's even if there weren't any objects that were handy around you, energy work, what you do with your intention and you can call it your mind, but it's not the mind that you think that you're using. It's not your analytical mind, it's your spirit mind. So that when you're in that spirit mind space, you can really create all this stuff and manipulate energy in a way that's free from the bounds of physical. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah, no, I'm picking up exactly what you're putting down. One of the questions I had a little bit ago that I'd love to ask at this particular juncture is we were talking about the toroidal field, and just before that, we were talking about, you said something like filling yourself up with more bits that feel more like yourself. There's bits that are more you, or coming back to yourself and more you. I think for some people tuning into this podcast, I think a lot of the people tuning in have a very good sense of themselves and what is actually themselves. But for some people, that's a completely foreign new thing. Any tips, any tricks, any suggestions on how to connect into the particular things that do make us feel more like us? And because I'm sure it's nuanced. Like at some points, Netflix is great because you're unwinding and landing back in yourself. At certain points, you're watching Netflix and you're binging and you're sort of going out into a portal of God knows where, Stranger Things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but
those great series. I love Stranger Things. Yeah.
Isn't it incredible? But yeah, please.
Yeah. So cutting down my mind's on Stranger Things, but
We've been
So how
discussing
do you,
Stranger Things all this. No, I'm sorry.
yeah. So how do you
Yeah.
tap in? How do you tap into yourself if you feel like maybe you're not sure what that means? So, what I find is most people, and I can really relate because that's exactly how I've been most of my life. Is not really having a strong, uh, not a strong identity, but not a strong, like a stable sense of like, who am I separate from other people? And so if you're feeling that, if it's hard for you to draw a boundary around and say like that's my energy versus not my energy, that just means that you're a highly connected person naturally. You're empathic, and so uh, it may feel like a curse, but it's actually not. It just means that you're, for whatever reason, some of us are naturally connecting with everybody all the time, and so the trick is to reframe that from being like something where it feels like, oh, I'm overwhelmed all the time, or I don't have a good sense of self, or I just have to do something to sort of like dull my senses into oblivion so that I can feel myself. So I'm not feeling everybody else. The trick is to say, oh, I came in really sensitive for a reason. This is a skill that a lot of people are trying to develop. It's happening naturally in me in such a strong way that I'm feeling overwhelmed by it. Okay, so I get a little training, like take like the energy training I have at Mind Valley Duality really helps. There's some techniques in there for, just how do you feel separate between you and the rest of the world. Actually, I got one right here. So pull out a little props here.
Awesome.
So like we use the rose in that case. So I tell people, just visualize a rose. You're just going to put it right at the edge of your aura. I can't put it far enough, but it's kind of imagine that's the edge of my aura. And you're just going to say, this rose is going to give me permission to have all the space between the rose and myself for my energy. So I'm just giving myself permission to just have this space. And then for somebody else, so somebody else comes along, this rose is going to give them permission to have all the space in the rest of the universe. Like, I just need this part right here. Now, that's a super generous offer, right? You can have all the space in the entire universe. I just want this part right here around my body, just for me. That's so generous. Everybody will take that offer, and it's permission. It's not protection. You're not stopping anything. You're just like, giving everybody permission to kind of sort it out. And when you start to work with an energy tool like this, it's coming from love. It's coming from permission. It's coming from flow rather than trying to stop something, because you can't stop being connected. You can't stop the flow of the universe. You don't even want to. You just want to be able to like carve out a little space and say, all right, this part's me right now. Wow, I feel really good. And so just simple energy tools like this can really help, if you're a person that's naturally super connected to the point where you're feeling like a little bit lost. Like I said, I can relate because I was like that for a lot of my life. It was rough. But this tool, I remember in Tokyo, the first time I was teaching this in Tokyo, I was surprised because people came back the next week to the next class, and a couple of students said, I can't believe it. It really worked. Like, they said, I hate getting on the train because in Tokyo, trains are pretty crowded. Sometimes people are like pushed right against you if it's rush hour. And they said, this time, I had my space. I felt fine. I didn't feel crowded, even though people were really close. Just kind of pull it in a little closer here. Now I have this space. I always have my own space. and so just switching, realizing that you're talking about your abilities, not your lack of ability. You don't have a lack of ability to disconnect. You have a strong ability to connect. You're always connected, so much so that you're having a hard time remembering like which part is me. And then if you want to go a little deeper and really blow yourself away, the reason why you're having a hard time remembering which part is you is that all parts are you. There's only one of us here. Right? Consciousness is singular. Consciousness is not plural. Bodies are plural, right? So if you're feeling like you're everybody, yeah, that's true.
You are.
Right? But it's also a little confusing, right? So you're in this body level experience that we have. We need to be able to have both. I need to be able to carve out a little bit and say, okay, okay, I can get it intellectually, or maybe not intellectually, just in my spirit mind that that everybody's one. But I still want to be able to go to the store and be able to function. Right? So, okay, in that experience, for that part of reality, you want, use a rose or use some tool. You can use a crystal. That helps if you're a crystal guy, you like me or a crystal woman, you can just put a crystal here and say, oh, that's going to give me permission to have my space.
Right.
And if somebody's attention comes, it's going to go toward the crystal rather than me. They're going to go, oh, that nice crystal. And you're like, oh, good. I'm glad that your attention stopped at that crystal and didn't go to me. Right? So you can, anything that works for you. Yeah.
I'll put a link to Duality in the show notes below for those that want access to some of the tools that can help you modulate what we've just been discussing. I think that'll be super useful. It's a brilliant course, very digestible and very practical, as you've just illustrated. I can't help but smile as always these conversations, Jeffrey. So we're talking about boundaries, and it's such a healthy thing in psychology to have boundaries, personal boundaries, like effective boundaries. I've done podcasts on boundaries. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that never has the conversation been about, okay, boundaries, but space. And as always, these conversations with you are so illuminating. It's, yes, like we can talk about protection and boundaries, but you were talking about permission versus protection, flow versus stopping, and even just that very illustrative point. I would love for you to expand into permission versus protection and flow versus stopping, but even just that practical example you just gave us was so profound, because I think we go, oh yeah, there's my boundary, like that's my boundary, like these are my boundaries, but you forget what it means to cultivate space, to just have that space, to give yourself space, and like how that can, even as you reframed it, like boundaries was something that was like, like I've got to prop it up, I've got to do this, and whereas space was like, oh, I'm like you said, like I'm entitled, not entitled to it, but it's like there's an infinite amount of space, like space.
Yeah,
you can just land.
Yeah, it's interesting. It all kind of comes back to this theme we're kind of getting into. This podcast is this idea of objects versus energy. If your way of contextualizing your experience is objects, then you're going to struggle. Like life is going, because that part of our mind, my wife calls it the material mind, that is specialized in the material world and the object world, is all about black and white and right and wrong, and it's how to deal with the living in scarcity. Just the reality that there's finite boundaries on this world, and so we have a mind that's beautifully designed to do that, but that mind has no information or no room to contextualize the infinite space, which is where energy and our spirit lives. And Hisami calls it spirit mind. That's our program that teaches about it. And but also everything online, it actually lives in the energy space now, and our currency is moving toward the energy space, or it already has. And so like so much of our experience is moving out of this finite realm into the infinite. And people that know that are, whether they know it consciously or not, people that align with that, I should say, are flourishing. But if you don't have room, if you have to logically sort out how do things make sense as if everything was an object, you will always struggle and suffer. Like you have to make room. Like, okay, not everything is mechanical and physical, and just that, like just starting to open that up and really help. But one thing that Hisami does that I love is students ask her questions, right? So we do live calls for graduates of our program every month, and people ask a question, and her answer is oftentimes is just a few words. She'll say, "Which mind is that?" And they're like, "Oh, okay. Oh, right. That's my material mind. Oh, got it. Now I understand." Because she's saying you're trying to ask for an answer in the infinite space, an answer that your spirit mind has and can provide, but you're asking your material mind what the answer is. Of course it doesn't know. It's not its job. It's like asking your hands to run. Like they're not paying for that. That's something for your feet, right? So that's it's fun. Just that one little question, which you can even ask yourself that if you haven't taken our class, like, which mind is this? Am I stuck in? Am I trying to describe something in finite terms, or am I okay that it's indescribable in words and it's infinite? Can I, love is like that, right? Well, you can't put love into, like, is it a 6 or a 7 or a 12, or what number, and how big is it? How many centimeters on each side? It's like, it doesn't make sense, right? Yeah.
It's really interesting to feel into that concept of, which mind is it? We mentioned Nassim Haramein before. We've had him on the podcast, and he mentioned something in the quantum physics. He grounded it in, actually. He was like, 13% of you is actually here in the material incarnate, and 87%, and I don't know how he does the math, but he does the math using sacred geometry, which is like so epic. And he goes, 87% of you is, is spirit. And so it's really, really wonderful to hear you sort of say, which mind, her say, which mind is it? Because it's like, are you coming from the 13%, or are you tuning back into the 87% where so much more of you expanded
Well, and
version
it's
exists?
really, I found it's just really helpful to have this. That's kind of the one of the core concepts in this training that my wife Hisami brought forth, is just the idea that I have two minds. We're just starting a little bit on social media. We're starting to put out a little bit of stuff, little teasers, just to kind of stir up the energy and get people's minds opening. And but just that idea that I have two ways of understanding the world, and neither of them is right or wrong. They're just for different purposes. Suddenly, like this, because when we think right or wrong or good or bad, even when we say there's two minds, people right away jump to like, oh, I get it. The spirit mind is good and material mind's bad, right? You're like, no, no, no. No, the finite, the material mind is about good and bad and in between, right? That's the realm. Spirit mind just is. It's infinite, right? That's when we talk about conditional love and unconditional love. Okay, easy. Conditional love, this mind. Unconditional love, this mind. Spirit mind. Right? Like, suddenly when you allow yourself to have both spaces, there's just this huge room that opens up. Like, I can describe things, or I can experience things in a different way. Everything doesn't have to make sense to both minds. It can make sense to just one of those two.
Wow, that is, such a great place to unpack things, like, from just, which mind are you coming from? I think that's just such a great question to ask yourself, to just, navigate your path and your journey as you're going around. One of the individuals I've had on this podcast as well was a Red Road man, and he was a peyote facilitator, really old master of this work. And he had this interesting conversation that he had with me that I was hoping to unpack with you at some point. Was, he said, in their culture, Native American culture, they didn't have words for gratitude. There was no word for thank you. And there was no word for sorry. There's no word for apology. And I started to unpack further as to, like, where this is coming from, and he said, you don't get to just, like, duck out of what you just did with a word, like, you're not just like, oh, someone did something kind for you. You don't just get to say thank you and that's the end of it. Like, someone genuinely showed you kindness. You repay kindness with kindness, was his wisdom. And you did something to somebody which warrants an apology. You don't just get to fling in a word and sort of walk away. It's you recognize, your karmic actions, and you go, okay, like, I'm gonna make that right. And if not with this person, then at least with another person. And you live your life differently. You live your apology, you live your gratitude. And I remember feeling into that, and the conversation was quite a long one, but I'm giving you the highlight reel there. The other piece that popped out of that was, he said, also, when you use words like thank you and you use words like sorry, because he's a peyote roadman, like, a lot of that work is energetic work, is kind of what they visually see it as. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But he says thank you, like, the energy sticks around a word when you use it. And sorry, the energy sticks around a word when you use it. And to keep the energy moving and flowing, it's better not to, in their culture, like obviously we've got our own systems now, to not use the word so it doesn't stick, but then also enact out and allow the energy and the flow to continue going.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, that really makes sense. So the way I would understand that is from the perspective I've learned from Hisami. So the words belong here. Words are something in your material mind. So spirit mind, or you can just say inspiration. Inspiration, as all of you know, when you get inspired, it doesn't come in words, and it doesn't. It's not finite at all. Oftentimes, like just in the moment, I'll see the whole project as if it were completed, as if people were experiencing it and I had done it all. And it's like in that moment, like, whoa. So sometimes you'll say, I got to download, right? But it's just like, it's not even, it's faster than that because downloads take time. It's just like in an instant, I experienced the potential that's available around this topic or whatever. And it's like, boom, all that comes in all at once. And then, of course, we're like, since we can see what it would be like if it was done, we kind of hope that next week it will be. But we forget that like in this material world, it takes a lot of time to make stuff, even if it's digital stuff, and even with AI, it's like, it just takes a lot longer than you'd ever want. Same thing. So words kind of live here. And so what I would say is, in a culture that doesn't have words for thank you or I'm sorry or, these things, that culture is probably, most of their experience is focused on the spirit mind. So it's focused on the infinite. So, and because when you're tuned into this infinite space, there's a certain sense of knowingness of, I guess I'd say, responsibility. But there isn't any judgment. Judgment is also a factor of our material mind. It's just something it's something that's helpful to be able to judge things. If you're sorting out which things are bigger or smaller and stuff, right? It's very functional, but it has nothing to do with energy or spirit. So if your culture is really tuned into spirit mind mostly, then if you do something that normally would say thank you or I'm sorry about, there's just an immediate understanding of I was out of balance in that moment in a way that had some impact on other people. And I don't feel guilty about it, so I don't have to say I'm sorry. But I am aware that it happened, and so I'm gonna pivot a little bit, and sort of move myself back toward balance, or maybe somebody else will help pivot me back toward balance. But when that happens, I don't even have to say like thank you to that person. I'm just, because it's all happening in the space of infinite love. So like, just the words aren't necessary. That's why they don't have them. Yeah, because they're operating in this space here. Because the words that are most useful are the ones that, it's the nouns, right? When like that's food, that's a rock, that's a bird. That's how words started, right? So it's talking about objects, right? Later, we kind of developed this like philosophical language, which is really fascinatingly, not sufficient.
It's really interesting to hear you diagnose it as that, because I can the truth of it is really echoing in for me as well. Because one of the things he said was, we don't call a tree like you said. The nouns are really useful. They say we like, and I've adopted this with my children. Just in like, I guess the podcast has an impact on me. Go figure. But like he goes, it's not a tree. We call that a tree, is kind of what he shares to his children. Like, we call that a tree. We call that grass. We call that, because it's so much, it's also green. Is it green or is it grass? And it's like, we call that green. We call that grass. We call that photosynthesis. And he was giving so much space for it to be whatever it innately is. And he's just got a label for it. And it was really interesting to feel what you said, because it's like, oh yeah, that totally feels like he's honoring the spirit of what is, rather than trying to, and that access of material mind, spirit mind. So, really, really profound, really helpful, really, really helpful. And I would have to agree and concur with you that they spend more
really
time in spirit mind.
But we could pivot around to AI right here too, just kind of come back to the beginning.
Perfect. Let's do it. Let's do it.
One thing that's happening with AI is that, AI is like almost this like perfect material mind in many ways. So like it has like infinite recall. It has like access to all the information that it was trained on. It's got some amount of logic, so it can organize things and so that the speech is compelling. Now remember, compelling and accurate are not the same thing, but compelling is what sells. Accuracy, it just doesn't matter at all. It's just compelling is what people want, right? But it's got this balance of accuracy and compelling speech, and but what it doesn't have, so it's got that aspect of the material mind, and it does it better than people, right? It's better than people at all that aspect. But what it doesn't have, the material mind also isn't just thinking and analytical. It's also where the emotions are. And this is a little confusing for people at first, because I think most people think emotions are close to your spirit.
Yeah.
And the body is close, like physical. So it seems like those are a set, like emotions and spiritual. Those are not a set. Emotions are 100% in your material mind.
Wow.
They're judgments, they're responses, they're reactions, they're memories of things being triggered. There's energy that basically has stopped moving, right? So I had an experience, I couldn't process it, and so I like crystallized it into form, into like an emotional thing that is stuck in my energy body somewhere. We call them pictures in my duality training, and so it's energy that got stuck there. And then when somebody says something that triggers that energy goes and starts moving. It's just like having a bunch of little buttons you could push that'll play some energy again. So none of that has to do with your spirit at all. That has to do with the body level experience of being in the time-space continuum in this way. So, but taking it back to AI, so what AI doesn't have is any of that. AI doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have trauma. It doesn't have like all these things that make us complicated and somewhat difficult as people. Even the most beautiful, wonderful people, at times when they get triggered are like difficult and upset, or, it's just natural. It's a human experience. But AI doesn't have that. It just has this word part and the logic part and the memory part. And so as we start in the next years, as we start leaning into it more, and AI becomes like a main part of our experience, we won't need to use our own material mind so much. Right now, we're kind of at the peak of like our material mind usage is sort of like maxing out right now, and people are totally overheating. Like that's why people are blowing up. That's why you see a rise in violence and suicides and all that. It's just because the material mind is just overheating right now. But AI is likely to solve that. As we lean more and more into that, AI will sort of take the burden off of like all this material world stuff that we think we have to remember, and like a year from now, hopefully I'll never have to answer an email again. I'll just like my AI assistant will just kind of give me a little summary of all that junk that came in, and I'll just like kind of nod my head or whatever, right? And so like that big burden we're all feeling, where our material mind is just overwhelmed to the point where it's hard to even tap into ourself, that AI is going to help take that away. And it can do it in a beautiful way that isn't like barking out emotional stuff like we tend to do when we're overwhelmed, right? So it's going to soften everything, and that's going to allow us to this is the potential I'm saying. That'll allow us to turn down the material mind, because we have this expert systems that we've created that's helping out. And what happens when you turn down the material mind? Suddenly you have more time, more room to spend experiencing your spirit mind. So the timing couldn't be better for AI to show up, because we're at the point where we're at the breaking point right now with people's consciousness. Like there's too much information coming in for us to process and still maintain a sense of self. And I think AI will fix that. Yeah. Technology and consciousness are always together.
Hi there, guys. I wanted to take a quick moment just to introduce you to my one-to-one coaching. It's something that I deeply love doing. As you can tell, conscious conversation is such a massive part of my life. And having one-to-one, deep, meaningful conversations with people where I get to show up as your brother or as the coach or as your mentor has been such a gift for me personally, and a gift for lots of the people that I have supported on the journey of living a more spiritually empowered, spiritually powered, spiritually aligned life. You don't have to take my word for it. Here's some examples of people all around the world that have experienced profound transformations through this coaching experience.
Amrit is a fantastic coach.
In a few sessions, he got to a depth that I'd only experienced before working with certain medicines. And
He's gone through a lot of the struggles that you're probably facing, and Amrit's been a really strong, supportive figure in my journey.
In control of myself.
I'm kinder to myself.
I actually have that vision and a purpose.
I do feel like I'm a better version of myself already.
Amazing energy.
He was easy to talk to, which made me easy to trust him.
Working with Amrit at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and really I was bouncing out of bed.
Whenever I get off the calls with Amrit, best money we've ever spent.
I would not recommend him because I don't want everyone to know about him and then I won't be able to book him. If he gets too busy, I won't get my turn.
I would say absolutely.
There's no way you can work with Amrit for a period of time without being transformed.
So if you're considering him as a coach, do not hesitate, because you won't be disappointed.
Alrighty, so hopefully that's inspiring your evolution onwards and upwards. And if you are so inspired to evolve, you can book in a one-to-one call with me directly at www.amrit.coach/life. And guys, if I can say so myself, I do think this is something quite special. Most people that I see building things online don't really work with people this deeply, this intimately, one-on-one as things start to grow, just because it is so time intensive. And yet I'm so deeply passionate about the transformation that comes from one-to-one coaching that just isn't available anywhere else. It would be my absolute honor and a pleasure to support your spiritual awakening, your spiritual path, your spiritual unfoldment. It is my life's work. I look forward to seeing you in the call. Back to today's podcast. Wow. Well, even the birth canal, I don't want to call it a technology because it's like your mother's sacred womb, right? What I'm hearing in this conversation right now is, amongst many things, there's our minds, our prefrontal cortex grew to the capacity that they've capacitated out, because our mothers, that's as big as they can get without, causing our mothers bodily harm at the point that we're birthed, right? And so what I'm hearing from you is, we've tapped that out, and so material mind, spirit mind, like we're at our capacity, and so now we're offloading that material mind component and taking it off and placing it in AI to some degree. Like emotions and trauma will still live with us, but who knows, maybe that clears up some of that stuff. Even there's always a prayer, and there's in that space there's the language and all that sort of stuff, and all the data and all the recall and all that sort of stuff is being handed over to AI. So that is like an extension of the mind, so that we can actually continue to evolve into more and more spirit mind, and delegate the perfunctory sort of everyday. Because it's also interesting, because some of the stuff you're referring to, just to sort of take off another tangent, is that's not the nature human anyway. Like the email stuff is not the warrior hunter. Like we've sort of gone through this, like we're linear beings, and there's exponential technology growth, and we're trying to keep up with the exponential technology growth, but we're not kind of meeting it. And it'd be really nice to just land back on our linear cadence, to be honest, and not have to keep up with this exponentially growing technology world, and just come back to nature.
There's a tool that's keeping up with it for us so that we can go back to being ourselves. And it's funny because I'm in my mid-50s, and so I remember when I was a kid, there weren't cell phones, and sometimes I look back with nostalgia. Like, I also remember that it was frustrating. I'd call my friend and it would be busy because maybe his sister's on the phone or something, or I can't use the phone because my sister's on the phone, or, but there was a certain simplicity there. Like if I wanted to see somebody, I had to just pick up the thing on the wall and dial it, or I'd just walk over to their house, knock on the door. Like now, even calling people is somebody in my family reminded me, they're like, it's kind of rude if you just call. You need to text first. And I was like, what? I didn't even know that. I was like, oh. It's like, oh, that's an invasion of privacy. That used to be like the only way. That used to be like a new way to get a hold of people. Now it's like, no, it's out of here. Um, but yeah, I think that growing up in times that were a little simpler in some ways, like, as much as I love technology, I'm a computer guy. I'm an early adopter. I love all this technology. it's I'm just grateful that it's finally coming around to the place where it has the potential to help us instead of just add more stuff for us to do. So, because that's not really why like you said, it's a very new thing in human experience to be in this just information overload all the time. And we're not made to live like that, and we're not doing very well. It's making people sick in many ways. Yeah. So, but thankfully, like I said, technology and consciousness evolved together. So I think it's kind of this, we had to ramp up to the point where we could like make this beautiful thing that'll be helping, and then we can have more space to return to, or as my wife Hisami says, remember our spirit mind. You don't have to even develop it or learn it or anything. Just remember your true essence. Yeah.
It's so beautiful because I think there's so much fear around AI at the moment as well, for people to go, oh, it's going to, take over human beings and take over all the things. And in this conversation, it will take over all the mundane stuff that necessarily you don't love doing, so that you can focus.
It's a good thing. We want somebody to have somebody non-emotional take over all that stuff. That's a good idea. People are not really made to handle that. But AI is made to handle that.
Yeah. And so bring me back into the moment where you're having a conversation with Hisami, and you've got this, what is it? The orange box. What is this rabbit thing that you've got, and you guys are
it's
able to
called
communicate
a rabbit.
now?
I wish I had it with me, but I'm pretty sure it's yeah. It's this little box about this big. It's bright orange, like brighter orange than you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And it's just got like a button on the side that you can push, and it's got a little dial and a little camera can rotate in, but it's all like super cheap components. Their idea was like, let's not make another $1,000 object for people. Let's just make something really cheap. And it's great. It's kind of like ChatGPT with a button on it. You just like ask it stuff or take pictures of stuff. But what I'm using it for is just translation. And it's kind of the same thing we're just talking about. It's a perfect example. So right now with Hisami and my language skills, both of us can articulate pretty well in our native tongue, but neither of us can articulate well or in a deep way in the other tongue, our foreign tongue. But with this, I can just push the button. Just in the moment, I can just be myself. And then when I release it, and turn it toward her, she can both read and hear what I said. And because AI has improved translation between these two languages to where it's useful, it's the first time we've really been able to do that. Just funny, when I used translation before, I was trying to use it for my business to translate stuff. This was when I was teaching psychic classes in Tokyo. The word rhinoceros came up over and over and over in the translations. It's like, and then the rhinoceros, I'm like, how is it getting rhinoceros?
Did you figure out where it was getting rhinoceros from?
I never got where it was coming from, but it was just so bad. It was just like not even in the realm of possibilities. And it was just you'd just laugh and cry, but you couldn't really communicate with it. But now it's getting to where in real time, we can have this kind of deeper conversation, and you can pass along a full insight rather than some, we can kind of like pass along like some spirit mind. The best I can do to put it into words, and that'll still get through. Where before, at best, you could sort of sprinkle some words around that were similar. It's kind of, but many times before, it's kind of like a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old having a conversation. There's just not enough vocabulary to get, to describe the whole experience.
Yeah, it's the mystical sort of drop in at the moment is that we're recovering from the Tower of Babel. It's helping us put together all the pieces back together. Man, talking about putting the pieces back together. Input versus output. technology, technological housekeeping, energetic housekeeping, money, energy and housekeeping, digital energy, object mind versus energetic mind, spirit mind versus material mind. This has been such a rich conversation, Jeffrey, as always. I'm going to put a special link in the show notes below. There's going to be an opportunity for people to go through your particular program, which is Spirit Mind, designed by yourself and Hisami. And we're going to go through it together, myself, members of the audience, and at the end of it, there'll be an opportunity for us to do some calls with yourself along the way and myself. 5 weeks is what I gather it is. And we'll put a link for people to apply to join the waitlist in the show notes below. It'll be a really incredible opportunity for us to connect into Spirit Mind. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the program Spirit Mind before I wrap things up here?
Sure. Yeah, I'll kind of give you just a quick overview. You probably got a lot of sense of it just right now as we're talking. But kind of in the big picture, Spirit Mind is what the world that my wife Hisami has always lived in. So since the time she was a child, she always was connected to everything, and she just knew everything that was happening behind the scenes. Like she sees energy in a way that is always on. It's not like a tuning in kind of thing. And so with that awareness over the years, she kind of just watched real life evolve and became aware of like, oh, this energy belongs over here. Oh, this is why people can't actually see about half of the world. That's why people are kind of confused. And then, so she started seeing all these energy patterns, and it was kind of fascinating for her. So it's your own firsthand study of the world. And, and she's about the same age as me. So in her 5 decades on the planet of like, what does it look like? What is actually happening here? And the training came about because I got an interpreter years ago and sat in one of her classes and was just blown away. I was like, wow, she's getting to the core of how things work. She's really speaking from this space of spirit mind, and without the distraction of material mind. And in a way that I'm not able to do it as sort of cleanly as her. Like I love this space too. I'm great in the space, lots of words, I can talk about anything, but that's really fun. I love my experience too, but I was like, oh, here's something different from me. It can go like the next level. It can take me the next level. And that's why I dove in with her and started making the program. And so in the program, it's that combination. It's Hisami's deep knowledge of how the world actually works energetically. It's always coming from love, without judgment, and how to in your daily life, be in that space more and more, and just tap into that part of you. It's, the part of you that's part of the whole, right? And then also I'm there kind of day by day, kind of breaking it down a little bit, saying, okay, what is she talking about exactly there? It seemed really simple, but you might be thinking she thought this, but actually she kind of meant this thing over here or up here, So I kind of I'm the navigator. I sort of help guide us all through this training. And as we were making it, I was also learning at the same time. So kind of get my experience as a student going through, a student of her work, but also an energy teacher for 20 years, right? So it's like a kind of a very advanced student going through, if I can refer to myself in that way without laughing, and so it's beautiful. It's a kind of a combination of these two very different personalities that can still meet in that space of love. Hisami and I are very, very different people, but somehow it works for us. Different languages, different cultures. One person rooted in spirit mind all the time. One person enjoying material mind as much as anything. And just to see, how does this work? How can opposites really work together, both with other people, but also within ourselves? That's the dualistic parts of yourself. How do those all fit together beautifully and in a space of love? So that's kind of I sort of wrap on that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. 5 weeks. We'll catch up every week. It's going to be lots of fun. Like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes and the description for people to sign up and apply to the waitlist below. Jeffrey, I always get to this juncture and I want to thank you for being on the podcast. And as always, it's so obvious that this is not just like a 90-minute conversation that you and I partake in. It is so much more than that. It always feels like a complete transmission and a download, and there is so much that's being pulled into the space from so many different places. It is a testament. I try my best to make it a testament to your life's work. Like, it really is so incredible. And I feel like we just scratch the surface every time we come here, but we go to such great depths as well. So thank you so much, as always, for being so abundantly generous with us, with your energy, your time, and your insights. And I absolutely love and adore these conversations, as I know the audience does too. Thank you so much.
Thank you
brother.
so much. I did too. It's really wonderful. Yeah, thanks so much. It's always great to be here, and I just love your enthusiasm. And probably you have some of the most interesting questions that always draw out like really interesting stuff out of me. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to be back. Consciousness is shifting right now in a big way, but it's like I'm both excited about it, and some parts of it seem scary too. Yeah, so because there's like Hisami is really good at this. Like Hisami is great at future questions, ask where the future is going and stuff. Like but it's really hard to contextualize future information until the experiences happen. Like a good example was probably close to 15 years ago now. Hisami was telling her clients, if you want to travel, this is a good time to go travel because in the future there won't be any planes in the sky. And that kind of like and after we got married, I remember hearing her say that. She's like, "Oh yeah, we really ought to travel now because there won't be any planes in the sky." And my brain was like, "Holy shit! What do you mean there won't be any planes in the sky? Like that sounds scary as hell. Is that like I'm thinking like solar flare or nuclear thing or like some sort of catastrophe?" And it was COVID.
Yeah.
She was just talking about COVID. She says, "I don't know what's going to happen, but I can just tell you for sure, like there won't be any planes in the sky." And it totally happened. And it was completely something I couldn't have even guessed.
Yeah.
Devastating, but not in the way that was an organic thing. It wasn't a technological thing at all.
So interesting.
And so the same thing, like, she talks about kind of the two paths that we're on, sort of splitting into two planets. And it's the same thing that you hear from when people talk about the fifth, and moving into the fifth dimension, or there's all these different concepts, ways that people are putting words around it. But I don't think we'll understand any of it until after it's happened.
Yeah, I find that split conversation really interesting because I don't really get it, especially when we're becoming more and more one. I'm sure the experience is ultimately designed for us to experience the greater levels of oneness, but yeah, it does seem to be that everyone is espousing that there is a split that's coming. Yeah.
I think AI is starting to. We talked a little bit about it today, so we're starting to kind of tease out what some of it may look like, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a scary or a bad thing. Right. So like I'm really excited when, if I can understand people are worried about not having enough money, but that is independent of working too hard. Right. So we should all stop working too hard. That would be a good thing for everybody on the planet. But we all need to have, food and shelter and stuff like that. But those can be solved independently. Right. Those are not we think they're related, but that's just like artificial coupling. Yeah. So I think, AI is probably going to play a big part of this like, splitting into two, but I can't really even put words around it. And when I look at the energy, it's, the energy is clear that something's happening, but the like situation and how it expresses in the material world doesn't look like it's determined yet.
Very interesting.
We're sort of writing that story. But it's kind of like one of the things that Hisami talks about in the beginning, in the first chapter of Spirit Mind, you'll see is she talks about, there's this new energy hitting the planet. And that's causing you to, like, your emotions to feel twice as big as they were. And it's like, it's kind of pulling us into Spirit Mind, back to our true essence. But she kind of, and then kind of, if you read between the lines, you can kind of see like that new energy is sort of like beaten down our material mind in a way that like we have to get it under control. We have to turn it down a little bit. Otherwise it's kind of this pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And although it's kind of like kindly said, right? You got to make a program that doesn't scare people. But but it's funny, the all of that like, and then some people will say, well, what's the new energy? What do you mean? What is it? And when I tune in, I was like, this is climate change. there's a new energy hitting the planet. There was like a barrier before where things were being deflected off, and now they're coming through. It's like, well, this is actually happening on a level like we polluted the planet in a way so that more higher vibration energy is able to come in. And unfortunately, that same energy is going to cook us if we don't slow down. And these bodies aren't going to be able to survive that kind of experience.
Yep.
So it's like, this is all happening at once. Like people evolved in a way, I don't think it's coincidence. Like we evolved in a way technologically that we were able to like trigger this response from the planet where a new energy is coming in. It's like both has a dangerous effect, but it also has this effect of like rising, our consciousness is going up. So it's just kind of like, okay, so how is it all going to play out? Is it going to play out in the way that like we actually do cook the planet in a way where this form isn't going to last? And like most people are just kind of like, be out of here. That could very well happen. It's like a realistic possibility. It's like if we do nothing, that will happen. If we don't change course, that we all know that will happen. Right? So we're trying to think about it, right? And so we're trying to steer the ship in a different way, but it's all related. But I don't think it's bad. I think it's all evolution. It's like our bodies, our consciousness, our technology, our planet. We're all evolving along this bigger growth plan that's impossible to see from this tiny perspective of 80 or 100 years in a body. It's just there's not enough context to understand it.
Inspired soul, you've made it through to the end of another incredible episode. Jeffrey is incredible. Every single time he comes on, I learn so much stuff about energy, spirit, and practically integrating energy and spirit into our day-to-day lives. On screen shortly will be other conversations we've had with Jeffrey around the tools of energy, around the tools of spirit mind, but going in a little bit deeper. One of my favorite ones was discovering his origin story. That'll be on screen in a moment, how Jeffrey became the teacher that he is today. Lots of twists and turns and adventures in that as well. So those will be on screen in just a moment. But just before we get there, please, as always, a humble request to take a moment for all of you that aren't subscribed to the channel to please do so. Everything you see around here, like I said, is powered and empowered by your subscription to the channel. It is such a blessing to be able to receive your love in this way. So please do take a moment to subscribe. As I'm saying the word subscribe, it's lighting up below. So please click that and click the bell notification icon. It keeps you up to date with everything that's happening here. And to all of you that are subscribed to the podcast, thank you so much for your incredible love and support. Everything here is powered by you, and that is not lost on me. I'm so grateful. It is such an honor to be your brother walking this sacred path by your side, touch wood. It is, thank you. Really, really, thank you. As promised, on screen now is your opportunity to go further with Jeffrey Allen and the Inspired Evolution. Click on one of the videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I'll see you there.